Found as a kid growing up, my parents split when I was three.
Mm,
Um, I have an older sister who's 9 years older than me, half sister.
mm,
My mother was married before, had my sister, married my father, had me, and then there was another split. And so I remember um, early on in my childhood bouncing around between the two, my
mm.
and out AA and NA. So you know they had struggled with that throughout my childhood,
Hmm.
and so um, I saw a lot, experienced a lot of
Yeah,
situations that, um, and I feel very fortunate that I I don't think I ever was I ever experienced like a truly um, you know physically traumatic situation.
hmm,
There were a lot of close calls.
hmm.
Um, my father got a DUI when I was in the car. Uh,
Mm,
my mother, not, I'm fourth grade and I'm not at, she wasn't home at midnight when I'm trying to get to bed, things like that, going to neighbors' houses and asking if
ah,
I stay over, and I'm 8 years old. So I I became very independent thinker. Um, really struggled with authority as a kid.
yeah.
I just,
As as would be reasonable given the functionality of the authorities in your life, your primary authorities.
yeah, yeah. So I struggled with behaving in school when I was young, I, but my grades were never a problem. So I, was always they thought I was too bored and they wanted to jump grades and all this other stuff. And you know, I just ADHD became a thing at that time. And does he have ADHD? And maybe, but again, there's other things going on that no
Yeah,
one really knew about,
yeah.
and I didn't really share it
Yeah.
either.
Well, you're a
I
kid. Well, you're going to say, "Oh, the chaos in my behavior is due to the chaotic situation that I'm being raised in right now." Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. The kid's going to say that.
yeah. So a situation happened um, in when I was in tenth when I was 10, where um, my mother kind of said, "Hey, I don't want to raise you anymore. I want you to go with your dad." And so and now we bring in the hero of my entire story, which is my grandfather. Um, my grandfather was a truck driver. Drove to Jersey and New York City every day. Drove back to Harrisburg. Um, he at this point was old, obviously older, so he taught at a Tech school, CDL. He was a CDL trainer. So Pops pulls up in a school bus, and he was using the train the guys, and picks me up, and I hang out with him for the day, and then I go with my dad. And it was at that point where my aunt and uncle said, "Hey, to my dad, if you don't get it together, we're going to take custody of Sean." And so I was, 12 and under was kind of just in this very chaotic space with family, being told by family that my parents had these issues. Hey, let us know if you see anything. Me not telling them and hiding it because I just wanted normalcy. So I was very much an adult by early, by 10, 12 years old in terms of decision making and like, maturity. I mean, I was not really involved in the stuff my friends were involved in. But I was an athlete. I was high school football, high school basketball, played football in college. Like I was in I was in the crowd, right? And but was very different than the folks that I grew up with in that respect because when they were wanting to go drink, I was like, "Oh, you guys have no idea." what
You want to do that? I know where that goes.
I know where
Not
that.
an attractive thing.
No, and I just didn't. As from a young age, the drinking, the drugs, even the you know, I didn't vibe with it. I thought I don't want to be anything like my parents. Maybe I have this, you know, everyone addictive qualities and all this stuff that we know is partially, but it's a mixed bag.
Right. Kids worry because of course they navigate according to what they see in their parents. And so they're just intuitive, not consciously intuitive, assuming I when I'm my parents' age, that will be me.
Yeah, yeah,
But of course, you're a kid. You can't say it. I mean, you don't know it, but oh gosh, it is so hard.
yeah. It was a tough childhood. Um, but and to kind of rewind a little further, we were like, well, weren't your parents in church? It's like, well, so my grandfather, on my mom's side, okay, her family was Catholic, Italian Catholic from Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, right? Grandfather was in World War II. He was in the FAA. He was an inspector for like planes, Air Force planes. So he moved to Harrisburg, right? And so they were Catholic, and my dad was raised with my grandfather on my dad's side. You know, kind of going to church every once in a while, not really engaged. And so it really all changed for my grandfather. And he has since passed 2 years ago. But he died at 86. He was the head elder of his church for years and years. When there wasn't a pastor, right? He was the pastor, and this is actually a pretty big church. So Harrisburg's first Seventh Day Adventist church, so one of the bigger churches in the conference in the state, because it's in the capital. So pretty large church, a lot of kids at the time. So a good spectrum of folks, and he converted to Seventh Day Adventist when he was baptized in the church when he was like 50. But before that, he was a rough and tumble guy. He was a truck driver. Something happened where he really made a big mistake and got and realized that he could have been basically put into prison for the mistake, and he was not charged and by that person, and realized, like, what am I doing with my life? Basically, I mean, that's his story. And he, for like 5 years, just while he was driving, listened to audio tapes, went to different churches, and that was the church that he gravitated towards.
Yeah, yeah,
He, you know, gravitated towards the idea of the Saturday Sabbath.
yeah.
He was a marathoner, so he was very health conscious. So the vegetarian, the no
Yeah,
alcohol,
yeah,
like all of that, and he knew his son was an alcoholic, so he was
yeah,
like these things just kind of resonated with him.
yeah, yeah.
So so that was the place where he found home. And so me and my cousins would go to church with him without our parents.
Okay.
And so was I raised in a Christian home? Yes and no.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes and no.
yeah,
Um, and so while my parents were struggling with all of this,
yeah,
I was hanging out with my grandpa, going to church,
yeah,
hanging out with people in church.
yeah,
My grandfather would go do communion for people who couldn't make it. We'd visit people in the hospitals.
yeah,
I mean, like everything I'm doing now is because I've seen servant leadership work,
yep, yep,
you
yep,
know, and
yep,
from someone who was not, you know, a look down your nose Christian, a legalist, you know,
yep,
the man cared for people. And when he died at 86, had a church full, standing room only funeral
yep,
with with his with me as his oldest grandson
yep,
and his um, his youth group kids that are now pastors,
yeah, yeah,
leading the service, you
yeah.
know.
Those eulogy virtues, and a eulogy story.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I told that story actually at the funeral
Yeah.
about who he was to me
Yeah.
and what he did for me
Yeah.
and how who I am is most in part of, I mean, we live 5 miles apart. I mean, I grew up, I hung out with him all the time, even as in high school, going over to his house on weeknights, hanging out, eating food.
Yeah.
We went to lunch every Sunday,
Yeah.
every Sunday.
Yeah.
Went to the sub shop down the street, and ate subs and fries and hung out and watched football the rest of the day or NASCAR or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I had a really amazing relationship with him. And then my dad was able to clean himself up and I lived with my dad for all of the rest of my upbringing and great supportive aunts and uncles and cousins and
Yeah.
so life became more normal
Yeah.
after that time.
Yeah.
But when you talk about when this concept of domicide comes up, I mean, there's a reason I'm working with homeless people.
Yeah.
I know how close it could have been. The grace of God. Um, what else can explain? I wasn't chosen to be born to my grandfather's family.
Yeah.
I it was by the grace of God that I did not become, because that was a trajectory. I didn't like authority. I was a rebel. I thought I was smarter than everyone. I told teachers I thought that I was very anti-authority. Um, I believed I knew best, and if I didn't get that support from my grandfather, aunts, uncles, I have no idea what path I would have been on.